Welcome. This is the Drupal usability meeting for November 29th, 2024. I'm Benji Fisher, sharing my screen and moderating. And also present are some of our regulars, Ralph Kohler, Aaron McHale, and Simo Helston. We're looking today at an issue we've seen before, 332-3354. It's for the Contrib project browser module, and the issue is to review all the pop-up messages shown by the Svelte UI installer for user friendliness. So in the past, we've looked at this. We created a Google Doc. I'm not going to try to read the URL. It's not all that bad. There are 10 strings we have to discuss, and we've proposed alternatives for some of them. And we're also looking at the GitLab repository for Project Browser. There is an open pull request, and some of the suggested changes are already being made here. So, Ralph, where do you think we should start?
I guess we could simply go through that diff on GitLab because that is the latest state, and it also differs slightly from our latest discussions in the doc. So the latest state to discuss is basically the GitLab. But I guess I've opened it side by side to see what our latest state back then was in the doc. So that might be interesting.
Okay, let me see. I don't need the sidebar. I'm only sharing one window, which makes it hard for me to show things side by side. But yeah, I think initially the messages were all fairly technical regarding what was going on in the back end with the uh, what are the package manager. Um, and yeah, since these are things that are going to be shown if something goes wrong while someone is browsing projects, we want them to make sense to someone in that context. Um, so shall we just start with this message here?
Yep.
Okay. So the original message was a stage cannot be unlocked while applying. And we suggested, or well, the current draft is another project is being added. Try again in a few minutes. I think the site administrator who's browsing modules and perhaps also recipes or themes isn't going to recognize what a stage means, but will understand another project is being added. That sort of describes the error condition, and then the second sentence suggests the action to take next. Try again in a few minutes. So I think that's a big improvement. Any suggestions for further improvements? Shall we?
Will
Go ahead.
will a site administrator understand the term project? That seems kind of, I don't know, is Project Browser like using the term project in the UI? I guess is my first question.
Yeah, that's a good point,
Uh,
and I think it's not.
Yeah. I wonder if like a term like extension is maybe more
Um,
approachable, but
just one note I wanted to raise before already. If you take a look at the doc, in our suggestion back then, we had module instead of project. But aside that, the whole rest of the pattern that was already suggested in the doc, they only changed it from module to project.
Okay. In the background, I'm installing Project Browser on my local copy of Drupal. Um,
But in general, it would be also my nitpick about that, I'm not a fan of using project. It's unspecific because in particular, as soon as there are more source types aside modules, it becomes confusing and diluted, sort of.
Did you say diluted or diluted?
Um, 1 second, I just look for de diluted.
Okay.
D
That,
Diluted.
okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
Um, so I just posted in the chat a link to this site, which is it's a local site. You can log in as admin as usual. Um, and I've just installed project browser. Um, interesting. Um, anyway, browse. So this is the user interface for the project browser. Um, and
That is a very old version you have.
I just
Because
installed it with Composer, so it's the latest release. I suppose I could try to do the dev version.
I thought they had an alpha a few days ago. 1
Um,
second. And you also don't have the composer version activated so far, because you're still seeing the view commands button.
right. So this is 1.0.0 beta 6.
You have to go with 2.0 alpha 6.
All right, let me see if I can.
1 sec, I'll post in the chat.
Well, that's not good.
Okay.
There are a couple of update functions still not working. Try that. I've tried uninstalling and reinstalling the module. That's better. Okay, so now it does say browse projects. Whoops, which answers Aaron's question, and the answer has changed since the older version. Um, you can browse for recipes. That seems to be the default now. Interesting. You can browse for modules. Um, presumably there will be an option for themes at some point.
Yes.
So given that that's the page title now, does that make us feel better about the current wording? Another project is being added.
I feel like the word project is problematic generally. So I don't
Well,
know. I don't remember if project is have it says browse project in the title, if that was like a conscious decision or if that was just because this is named project browser. Like I feel like it's probably should like a word like extensions would be better though. But
So extensions has a technical meaning in Drupal. It means module or theme or what's the word? Distribution.
Hmm.
And we're now also including recipes, which are not extensions.
Yeah, but I feel like that's more of a term in the user interface. Like we use extensions, as you said, to refer to modules and themes. Like you could, okay, a recipe probably, I wouldn't consider an extension, but projects feels like doesn't feel like a feels like a worse term because that could be really ambiguous to someone. At least if you talk about extensions, like that's a term that you would be more likely to see in, something like WordPress and other CMSs, other platforms.
So of course we have the breadcrumb extend. And that's also what we have in the menu, right? Extend.
Yeah.
So extend goes with extensions.
Yeah.
Um, so are we going to recommend that they change the page title and instead of browse projects, make it browse extensions? I guess you probably can't see my
Mm.
browser tools, can you?
No, we can't.
But we can see the result of the change. So,
Yes.
mm. Yeah, I think that's definitely more of a approachable term. However, um, I just by coincidence had remembered about the issue where we were trying to unify the H1s across tabs, and so I don't know what the list one says.
It says
And
extend, update, uninstall. So here we have some duplication between the
yeah,
local tasks or the second level of navigation and the H1.
yeah.
And if we ever do implement the suggestion of um, using the same H1 for all of these tabs, then it would presumably be extend, and then we would just have these um,
Hmm.
second levels. Maybe it should be extensions rather than extend.
Yep.
Yeah.
Um, One thought, could you go back to the browse
Of course.
tab, please? Um, on one hand, I'm in line with Aaron's point. I'm not a fan of going with projects in the string. And in general, the idea of the change the H1 to extend or browse extensions, for example, uh, might be worth a thought. But on the other hand, then I would question why is it called then Project Browser and then you have browse extensions instead. Um, but circling back to the initial question in here about the string and what to use there, because in our example we had module and they've changed it back to project and Aaron suggests extensions, but the question is basically more about because would it be possible, or one second, could you go to configuration? One second, you have to go first to extend to the list page and install the package manager. the
Really?
experimental module.
This one? Requirements? No.
No. Package man. Oh, what is that? Testing. Oh, it's. Oh my God.
Is it hidden?
It's hidden. Yep. They've hidden it. It's in core already.
Well, the package manager bypass requires the package manager, so presumably enabling this will do it.
You could try.
No.
Oh no. Okay, then. Okay, and then I try to explain. There you see the instruction to install module. Set the value testing package manager to true in your settings PHP. That was the bit I forgot. In the error message in the first.
So do I have to edit settings.php?
Yes, simply adding the testing package manager to true value there, and then install package manager, and then go to configuration. I tell you after.
Uh, Settings of extension discovery scan tests. Is that the right setting?
No, simply the what's written in the error message up there.
Oh,
That one, yep.
okay. Testing package manager. Ah, whoops, didn't mean to do that. Okay, so that message went away. That's good. Um,
Now search a filter for package manager again.
Core experimental.
Oh, it package manager bypass is installed now. Oh.
Well, it's still
Hmm.
checked. I'm not sure it was. Okay, experimental modules, blah, blah, blah. Must install. Would you like to continue? Yes.
And now go to configuration, project development, project browser, and check the allow installing via the UI and save.
Okay.
And now go back to extend, browse.
There we go.
Yeah. And the point is, and the question about that string, because at the moment they've introduced basically a bulk selection where you're able, if you click select now, for example, content search, as you can see at the moment, you just get that button in the lower left, install selected projects. That
Down
should
here.
basically become that black or dark bar that is, for example, on admin content. So such a bulk functionality. And the question here is, yeah, exactly that one.
Okay.
That
Oh,
way
but
it's more visible.
yeah, but of course, this entire page is provided by PHP, and this page is not. So you can't simply reuse the same code. It has to be re-implemented.
Yeah, it is. At the moment, there is work and it should be finished until Singapore. That is the plan as far as I understood. But yeah, from my perspective, the problem is the scope of that select. If you're only able to select projects on, for example, recipes, and then install all the recipes, or if you're able to select one recipe and 2 or 3 contrib modules, and then install everything at once. And it is not at the moment, because otherwise the button would be still there. Because then, personally, I would consider it more clear if you would be more specific. So, and I would go still with the suggestion we had in the Google Doc, meaning another module is being added or another recipe is being added. And keep the terminology specific for the context you're in, either a recipe or content module.
I see. So you'd like a more specific word here that might be technically difficult to provide that information. I'm not sure whether the package manager knows or cares whether it's a module or a recipe or something else. And so the 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 package manager is only giving us this information that it is installing something, not what that something is. So I don't think the project browser can figure that out.
Good point.
So I agree from usability point of view that that's a good idea. And I guess I often say that we have the luxury of not worrying about implementation. So yes, the usability recommendation is to be more specific, but that might be technically very hard to do. Um, so yeah, let's say first recommendation is to use a specific term, recipe or module or whatever it is that's being added. If we don't have that information, what's our fallback? Should we say extension? Should we say project? And should we start with the recommendation that instead of browse projects, we say browse extensions? I guess the question also came up why the module is called project browser to begin with. I think the answer to that is that the original idea is that we would be browsing projects on Drupal.org. So project browser itself is a project, and the URL says project/project browser. So on Drupal.org, we have this idea that projects is fairly general. We have modules, we have themes for a long time. We have distributions. Um, a year or two ago, we had maybe more. We added general projects, which are not categorized. We're thinking that recipe is going to be a new project type. So that's where the word project comes from. It's sort of a technical term on Drupal.org. But I'm not sure that we have to stick with that. The module name isn't going to change at this point. It will be project browser, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we have to use projects in the user interface.
Yeah, and I think like this will probably become more apparent even more so when we move to GitLab, which also uses projects, and the fact that I think projects make sense in the context of GitLab and Drupal.org because you've got the code, you've got issues, you've got merge requests, Kanban boards, planning, all the stuff you would have in a project. Whereas this is the interface that users will see to download things. So this is like the app store of Drupal, right? So um, the app store on iOS isn't called the, I don't know, um, project browser, you know, project store. The end result of that is you have an app. In Drupal world, you have an extension or a module or a recipe. So yeah, we should do our best to be consistent in what users see.
Just one question for clarity. Could extension be considered a synonym for project? Strictly speaking. So basically project as the term used in the context of Drupal.org and extension used in the context of Drupal, the CMS.
There are some technical differences between them, but I think from the user interface point of view, I think we can consider them synonyms. Yes.
I think it more comes down to what people understand those things to mean. Like if you're a project manager, just for instance, you probably think about a project. You hear the word project, you think about things like Jira, and you think about, or issue management, Scrum, that kind of stuff. If you're a developer, you might think about your code repository. If you're a site builder, you're probably not thinking about those. When you hear the word project, you're probably thinking about something completely non-technical. You know,
Yep.
maybe your local government has projects, and that's, maybe you work in local government and that's your exposure to the word project, right? So, or maybe you're in higher ed and projects means something different. So, whereas I think for users, extensions, extend like that, it describes what they're maybe more familiar with. Like I said, if you're using, another CMS or you're using an online tool or something that you can extend, and it's a bit more descriptive.
Right.
And
I think,
maybe, sorry, go ahead.
and I think just to be consistent with the navigation we have, extensions makes sense. So we might get some pushback from this. It would be nice if Chris had been able to make it to the meeting. But yeah, I think we have consensus at this point. So do we have to keep discussing it that we want to change it from projects to extensions?
If a general term should be used for that string for technical reasons, then yeah, extensions would be preferable over projects. Because
And
it should stick to the terminology that is used in the admin UI and not to the terminology that slips in from over Drupal.org.
yes. And along with that, we should change browse projects to browse extensions. I get a thumbs up from Aaron.
Yep.
And we are keeping in mind that eventually we might want to use the same H1 for all four of these local tasks or tabs. Okay. So go ahead.
Yeah, does it even need the word extensions? Like the tab is browse. If it was just browse, is that enough? Because then you've got the tabs below it are like contributed modules, recipes.
I think you do need something, um, because otherwise the only clue in the navigation is the breadcrumb, which says extend.
Mm,
Um, and
yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
and again, we might change the H1 to be extensions consistent across all four, and then we'll have what you suggest,
Yeah.
extensions and browse.
Yeah.
Um, but until
Uh,
then, I think we need the word extension in the H1. What we don't need is browse, but we're keeping it in for now.
yeah. I'll flip the question around and say then should the tab be browse extensions? Or does that make is browse enough in the context of those tabs when you're on like the list page, when you're on the list tab? Is if you're there and you see the tab browse, is that clear enough? Like, um, would people understand the difference between if they saw the list tab and the browse tab? Do you think that's
Well, that's a good question, but
because if you're on the list tab, there's not really indication that it, like if you go to browse, like browse extensions is possibly a bit clearer as to what you can expect from that tab.
oh, I don't think that would really help. It would also, sort of be hogging a lot of space in this row.
Mm,
I think the real distinction between these two tabs is that this lists things that are already installed in the code base, whether they're enabled or
hmm
not. And this is new things you would add to the code base. And I don't think list and
No,
browse make that clear. I don't know how we would. Sorry, Ralph,
mm,
go ahead.
no, that's also not correct. Um, Only in part. If you go back to browse,
Uh-huh.
please. Um, that's one of my biggest gripes with Project Browser at the moment, contrib modules are remote, as you've said, not in the file system yet, except the ones, for example, if you search for, if you install the token module, then you get the installed button. So it's a mix of remote modules as well as already installed ones. But technically, the source type for contributed modules is remote, strictly speaking. But if you take, for example, recipes, at the moment, if you go in there, switch to the second.
Just a minute. So Project Browser is listed even though it's already in the code base and installed.
Exactly. That's so
that's
it's imprecise, but in general, it's mostly the contrib modules tab is about remote.
that's kind of amusing actually. That would be like going into the App Store on my iPhone and seeing and searching for App Store and being able to like install the App Store or something. Um,
Inception.
yeah. Um,
If you clear the search again,
Uh-huh.
um, press return.
I did. It's a little slow.
Okay. Um, in here, you have basically all the recipes that are delivered with core, and those are already in the file system.
Yes.
But that's not clear at all. And in the future, there will be also recipes on Drupal.org, and then how to distinguish what is in the file system already, what is remote. Again, not clear. It's implicit. You need technically the understanding and the knowledge which recipes belong where and what their source is. And it's complicated. And also, you have also the option if you go to configuration, development, project browser, and activate the core tab uh, for core modules, then those are basically a mirror of, just move the core modules up into the enabled section and save.
Mm.
And if you go back to the other tab, that way, core modules, it's basically a mirror of the list, just in the style of project browser with cards, but
Okay.
still, those are also in the file system.
I I think actually the plan is to remove the list page at some point when and have Project Browser completely replace that. So maybe
Mm.
worrying about the distinction between these is sort of a temporary problem.
I would strongly oppose that step, honestly speaking.
Oh, why?
It's confusing. And if you take a look, for example, we did it in a previous meeting, I think you were on vacation or on a
I have an excuse.
event. Yeah, no, trust me, you were not there, but there we've taken a look, for example, in comparison with WordPress and their approach, and there you have clear separation of concerns there, and stomping everything into a project browser and trying to manage everything with project browser is, I'm not sure if it's the right step. The list page needs work, that's for sure, but it's not, from my perspective, not necessarily the right choice, letting project browser taking over everything. And for example, and just one note, I've did some impromptu interviews in the Drupal the Drupal Dojo Austin, and their feedback was basically that core modules tab is completely redundant and doesn't make sense at all. Meaning,
This
it would
tab,
be
you mean?
because if you go there, you have the tabs, but basically there's no content in there for each of the modules. And the point was basically to merge those two and make basically um, the distinction between contrib and core, which is also a Drupalism for someone who is not familiar with Drupal yet, challenging, and make that core and contrib distinction basically a filter. That way, you see if you search for something, and you search for everything, contrib and core together, then you see, I have, for example, a core module, and you could sort core modules first and then the contrib modules underneath in the search results. That way you see, for example, I have two modules in the context of migration already there that are not installed yet, for example, and so forth. But I have problems merging list and browse. And as I've said, taking a look at the WordPress in comparison, they have a clear separation of concern there. It's straightforward, and they have basically, and that brings back to the point, Aaron, with browse. They don't have a browse tab. They have simply a add plugin button, and that plugin button fires up basically their project browser or their plugin browser, and that way it's super clear.
So just to be clear, the separation of concerns you're talking about is installing it into the code base, downloading the files, and then enabling it. Are those the two?
Um, Not necessarily. Now, the separation of concerns here is it is not clear. It's implicit which of those tabs, contrib modules, recipes, and core modules, which of the results you have, which are already in the file system, which are not. That is not clear. And also, the problem Aaron raised with browse. It's also because if you're on the list page and you see browse, I'm already browsing extensions, technically speaking.
Okay. Well, I just changed my settings.php, so when I reload, we should not see all of these testing modules. But go ahead, Aaron.
Like the evil one.
Oh no,
Um,
it didn't work.
I did wonder why there was 508. I was like, wait, there's not that many core modules. Um, I'm not, I guess like from my perspective, um, I, yeah, I'm not sure like merging the lists and browse, like the project browsers are taking over the list. I don't know if, I think there's a lot of potential pitfalls there. Like if you've got custom modules, it's like they don't, they wouldn't make sense to appear in project browser. Um, and it's nice to have a clear list of, okay, these are all the things that are like installed potentially. And then also like how do you deal with like sub modules with project browser? I don't know. I'm not like the concern that Ralph raised around what's in the file system or what's not. I'm not totally sure I understand what like the concern there. I guess because like if you're installed, like does it matter whether it's in the file system or not? It's either installed or uninstalled. And if you care whether it's in the file system, you're probably managing the composer file separately. Most site builders, I imagine it'll be installing recipes and things using Project Browser probably don't understand or need to understand the distinction between whether something's in the file system or not. We could expose that with some kind of thing that's like, oh, this is already downloaded, but it's not installed. That could be useful. So like if you install it again or run it again, it's not going to download it. That could be useful. But again, I think that might be irrelevant with the list page because also I think recipes are the intention is, and I might be wrong, but the intention is they'll clean themselves up. So for instance, like when a recipe runs, I know there's an ongoing issue, maybe it's resolved, I can't remember, to have the recipe unpack its composer dependencies into the root composer JSON so that they're all there. And so the idea with the recipe being it should, once it's run, that's it, it's done. So yeah, I think I'm not sure. I can't remember where we were in the conversation because I feel like we went down a rabbit hole there. But yeah, I think there's a lot of too many pitfalls to get into in the remaining time of this meeting, though.
Yeah, so we started talking about some user interface text, and we've gotten sidetracked into these questions of the overall design and scope of the project browser. Is this going to be really confusing to people who are starting to use Drupal?
I think yes, potentially.
I think this is the thing of where at first maybe, but I think when you're using a system for the first time, there's a lot you don't understand, and so you're in that phase of like understanding and learning things. So whatever ultimately ends up being the naming, and this is the case with some of the Drupalism stuff, right? It's like sometimes there's never going to be a perfect way of calling this thing what it is, and that's okay because when the user learns what this thing is called, then they know what it's called, and then they don't need to relearn that thing. But we should try and strive for terms that are familiar to people so that they don't feel like it is such a big learning curve, which is part of the problem with Drupal right now, with it feeling like a big learning curve. And so the terminology we use, while it doesn't have to always be perfect, and sometimes there are good cases for not using common terminology because maybe something is so different from what users are used to, we want to make it so clear that this is a different thing. But we should do our best to make the adoption easier by using terms that people are more familiar with, which is why, like extensions, because you'll find that in other products, other CMSs is probably better than projects, just to wrap us around to where we were half an hour ago, I think.
Right. Ralph?
Just one brief addition and comment. I raised my hand before and I forgot again what I wanted to say, and therefore I put it down. But yeah, the point is there was basically a way to distinguish about the question if something is in the file system or not. There was a way to distinguish that before. Back then when there was a drop button on a modules card. There you had basically at first the add, for example, token module. And that means it was not yet in the file system. And if you pressed add and it got added, it was basically a composer require, then the button turned into install. And that way it was visually clear and communicated clearly that basically what the state of the module was. And that was stepwise removed. First, it became a install and add and install button. And now it turned into a bulk action that does basically the same with add and install underneath. And the problem I have, if people simply learn the processes and follow them through, nevertheless, what basically the microcopy is, and they don't understand what are the underlying constraints, then if the label is changed in the future or if anything goes wrong, they are lost. So therefore, I would vote for being specific for one, and on the other hand, also to make clear the implications and make them explicit instead of implicit.
Okay, so we have less than 10 minutes left. We already have one concrete recommendation, which is to change the H1 and um, and the related error message, or in instead of another project, make it another extension. Are there any other concrete recommendations we can make at this point? To address a step in the right direction to address the possible confusion that we've been talking about, the duplication between list and browse, separation of concerns, understanding whether something needs to be downloaded or enabled. Do we have any concrete recommendations?
I made one on the issue in the context of if something is installed or not installed. At the moment, it is only working for modules in the UI, but as a suggestion, have basically some sort of list page that you currently have for modules, the same for recipes, because some of them you could apply again in the future. And also the point, that's my main gripe with Project Browser, with Drupal CMS is, and the extend page is, if you're getting to the site and you don't know which recipes are applied to a site. So if you're, for example, a freelancer or a consultant or whoever who gets new to a project, or you get a new job and you get to a big site to get an idea and the situational awareness of an install, to get an idea which modules got installed as well as which recipes got applied. That is impossible to say. And that way, for figuring out problems and the like, problematic. And also have a contained place where you see the list of all available recipes for a site might be also helpful. That would be one suggestion.
So this page already lists the recipes that are found, well, in core.
In the file system, yep.
Right. So that's presumably if I download additional recipes, it will show them as well.
At the moment, you are unable to search Drupal.org, and I'm also not sure if there is already a repo. It's strictly local at the moment, recipes.
Hmm.
But as soon as you have recipes online, then that tab becomes confusing.
I'm a bit confused by your confusion, to be honest. Because
Well,
like I don't wanna, I'm just not sure I understand where your concern is around things being in the file system or not. Because like for recipes, once they're applied, that's it. They have no more purpose. So it either doesn't matter if they're in the file system, like you're not going to apply it again unless you like manually undo everything. And as I said, I think the intention is that eventually they will just clean themselves up. But that might be wrong, but that's the impression I get.
but they are idempotent, so they are able to be run again.
I don't think. I can't think why you would though, because once a recipe's been run, it's done everything it needs to do, right?
It is a goal of recipes to be idempotent, as Ralph says. And I think that at least it should do no harm. Like
Mm,
there is no point in applying it and then applying it again because it's idempotent. But on the other hand, there's no danger in doing it. So
yeah.
so that's the point of idempotence. It does not currently find recipes that I've downloaded to my file system. That's what I was just testing a minute ago
Oh.
while you were talking. Presumably, it's still in development and we're going to search Drupal.org for recipes and we're going to certainly list the ones that are already installed. Yeah, I think Aaron is correct that it's sort of intentional that we can't tell whether a recipe has been applied, and so that information just isn't stored. There's no way we can say that the admin theme has already been applied because it's part of the I guess it's part of the umami recipe. That's not currently the way it works, but that's how it's planned to work. But there's no way to tell that and display that information. Um, so we now have just 2 minutes left. I guess we don't have any further recommendations beyond replacing projects with extensions. But I think this is something that a lot of people care about at the moment, and maybe we should come back and come up with some suggestions for the overall structure of the project browser because we really don't want it to be confusing if it's an important part of Starshot. So shall we resume this conversation next week?
Maybe I can ask Chris if he will be able to join next week.
Yeah, that would help.
It might be helpful. And to be fair, I guess the point about module or extension, the term module project was used several times, I guess, in the merge request. And so we covered a bit more than a single string today.
Okay, we see a project here. We
In
see
the
a
second
project here.
also.
Yeah. Okay. Great. We're at time. Hope to do this again next week.
Okie doke. Have a nice weekend, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.